In the quiet early hours of Greater Manchester, a team of armed police closed in on a nondescript industrial estate. The lights were off, the shutters drawn, but behind one of those units, a multi-million-pound criminal empire was being dismantled, piece by piece. A voice crackled over a burner phone just days earlier. 5-0 busted the yard again. It was already too late. This was no ordinary car theft ring. It was an international chop shop operation run by career criminals, working under a sinister alias. The Company. Their targets weren't hatchbacks parked on dimly lit streets. They were going after luxury Range Rovers, Audis, BMWs and Porsches, many stolen in violent home invasions, or while victims slept upstairs. In some cases, families were threatened with hammers. In others, the thieves posed as airport valets or struck while people were out in their gardens. But this gang wasn't just selling cars. They were exporting parts to Dubai, laundering dirty money through fake companies, and even exploiting government COVID-19 relief schemes to fund their criminal enterprise. This is the story of how one of Britain's slickest, most ruthless car theft syndicates built a £3 million operation, and how it all fell apart under the weight of greed, arrogance, and a trail of stolen engines. They called themselves The Company, a fitting name for an organisation that ran like a business, except its profits came from crime. On the surface, they were car dealers, mechanics, exporters. But behind the shuttered units and fake invoices was a well-oiled criminal machine orchestrated by men who had no interest in playing by the rules. At the top of the hierarchy was Asif Hussain, the ringleader. He projected the image of a legitimate businessman. He lived in a large detached home in Stockport and operated German Automotive 365, a car garage with all the right paperwork on the surface. But the business was a front. Hussain wasn't just selling cars, he was stealing them, stripping them, and shipping them overseas. Then there was Sajid Jangir, his trusted lieutenant. Jangir wasn't just involved, he was embedded. Court records later showed he had a hand in at least 27 individual thefts. He was also the registered tenant for multiple industrial units where cars were disassembled and prepped for export. These weren't abandoned backstreet garages. They were fully operational chop shops, complete with heavy-duty lifts, forklifts, and teams of men ready to pull a car apart in hours. Alongside them were men like Hadir Ali, Tayyub Hussain, and Ibrahim Shafiq, each with their own role in the network. Ali helped move stolen parts. Tayyub was caught red-handed trying to launder stolen vehicles through a rental scam. And Shafiq, he did more than just dismantle cars. He used his fake company, Carbreakers Ltd, to obtain government COVID-19 bounce-back loans totaling £95,000. Money meant for struggling small businesses during the pandemic, instead funneled straight into a criminal empire. The gang was organised, disciplined, and paranoid. They communicated through WhatsApp groups with names like The Company, keeping discussions short and using code where possible. Still, police would later recover dozens of damning text and voice notes, jokes about raids, complaints about lost stock, and even shopping lists for parts they needed stolen. Their operation spanned Oldham, Bury, Bolton, and beyond. They targeted high-value vehicles, mostly Range Rovers, Porsches, and Audis, often stolen to order. Once taken, the cars would be rushed to one of their hidden units. Within hours, they'd be stripped for parts, boxed up, and prepared for shipping. The rest, engines, gearboxes, interiors, were either sold on or hidden in shipping containers bound for the Middle East. 11 containers were sent overseas during a 12-month period. 3 were intercepted, 1 at Seaforth Docks in Merseyside, another in Istanbul, and 1 in Sharjah, UAE. All contained stolen Range Rovers or parts linked to vehicles taken in the UK. This wasn't petty crime. It was a sprawling, calculated criminal enterprise worth millions. And the worst part? Some of these men had already been arrested during the investigation, but were released under police supervision. They didn't stop. They just moved shop, found new units, and kept going. Greed, arrogance, and a belief that they were untouchable kept them moving. But behind the scenes, detectives were closing in. The gang didn't just wait for cars to appear. They hunted them. Their targets were deliberate, their methods brutal. High-end vehicles weren't just stolen at random. They were often taken to order, with gang members scouting specific makes and models. Range Rovers, Audis, Porsches. If someone overseas wanted it, they'd find it, no matter where it was or who it belonged to. In one case, a man at home with his family in Failsworth was threatened by masked men who told him he'd be killed if he stepped outside. They took his Mercedes as he watched, helpless, clutching his young daughter. In another, a man out running errands was attacked in broad daylight, his car gone in seconds. There were break-ins, ambushes, and even a fake valet scam at Manchester Airport, where a victim handed over his car keys to a man in a high-vis jacket posing as staff. And this wasn't just Greater Manchester. Vehicles were taken from driveways in London, Cheshire, and Birmingham, sometimes while owners were asleep upstairs. In one incident, thieves entered a home while the family was in the garden, grabbed the keys, and vanished before anyone noticed. Another victim came home from holiday to find his car missing and his driveway eerily empty. Once a car was taken, it was immediately moved, often within an hour. GPS trackers were ripped out or jammed using signal blocking devices. The vehicle would then vanish into one of the gang's workshops, sometimes never to be seen in one piece again. The gang made no effort to cover the violence of their methods. One car was taken after its driver was forced off the road and attacked while inspecting the damage. Another was linked to a robbery where masked men, one armed with a hammer, stormed a house and snatched the keys in front of a terrified family. These were not chance encounters. They were coordinated, pre-planned thefts carried out with military precision. As they worked, the gang kept logs. Text message chains between members showed cars being scouted, followed, and listed for collection. Phrases like "fresh one" or "need this shape range" gave detectives insight into how vehicles were selected. They weren't just after anything valuable. They wanted specific models, fitted with the right tech, colours in demand abroad, and worth the effort of stripping or exporting. This level of planning wasn't just about profit, it was about scale. Between January 2020 and January 2021, the gang were linked to at least 90 vehicle thefts, totaling over £3 million in value. Some were dismantled in hours. Others, especially intact high-spec Range Rovers, were sealed in shipping containers and sent overseas, some ending up in Dubai, others stopped mid-route in Istanbul or Sharjah. For a gang as well-organized as this one, you'd expect they would have covered their tracks. But for all their efforts to disappear into the shadows, the truth was, they left behind more than they realized. Detectives from Greater Manchester Police, alongside the serious and organized crime group, had been watching. Piece by piece, they began connecting the dots. It started small. A rented Audi A4 that had been loaned out by a dealership in Altrincham wasn't returned on time. The dealership had been told it was stuck in London, but the car's GPS told a different story. It was parked at an industrial unit in Chadderton. When police turned up to check, what they found changed the course of the investigation. Not only was the Audi inside, but it was surrounded by parts from at least 5 other stolen vehicles. The location had all the hallmarks of a chop shop: cars stripped for parts, frames cut down, identifying numbers ground off. That find set everything else in motion. The same suspects appeared again and again. Adam Elwood had rented the unit. His name would come up multiple times across several locations. The police now knew they weren't looking at isolated thefts. They were staring down the barrel of a far-reaching multi-million-pound conspiracy. What followed was a trail of broken promises and false names. After the Chadderton unit was uncovered, the group simply moved on. They used fake identities, like David Brown, to lease new industrial units in Wigan. It didn't take long for police to follow. Again, they tracked another stolen rental, a Mercedes-Benz, which had been reported stolen by one of the gang members themselves. But the car's tracker led officers straight to a new chop shop. There, they found Haider Ali standing next to a running forklift, pretending to be waiting for a friend. As if that could explain the dismantled Range Rover parts and stolen engines all around him. One by one, the units were uncovered. Vale Mill in Chadderton, Pioneer Mill in Radcliffe, another in Bury. Each one held more stolen vehicles, more dismantled parts, and more evidence of a slick, ongoing operation. At Vale Mill, police discovered 17 stolen vehicles in one raid. Some were already stripped to nothing but chassis. Others were in the process of being broken down. One Audi RS3 had been violently stolen just hours before. When officers arrived, it was already in pieces. The gang knew they were under pressure. Text messages pulled from seized phones showed them planning to move out, switch tenancy names, and lay low. But their efforts were in vain. Police now had an entire digital trail: communications, GPS data, lease agreements, bank records, and photos. The members even joked in their encrypted group chat, 5-0 busted the yard again, as if police raids had become routine. But their sarcasm only helped investigators. Every message chipped away at their defense. In the end, it was the phones that betrayed them. Images, location pings, voice notes, and even shopping lists of car models to steal. This wasn't a loose network of thieves. This was a calculated, structured gang, stealing to order and cashing in fast. And the cops had the proof. Despite the gang's best efforts to stay hidden, it was only a matter of time before the machinery they built started creaking under its own weight. Too many moving parts, too many voices, and too much greed to keep things quiet forever. It all began to unravel from the inside out. The Audi A4 hired from a dealership in Altrincham was the first clue. The car was supposed to be in London, according to the gang. But a quick GPS check told a different story. It was parked outside an industrial unit in Chadderton. Police moved fast. Inside, they found not only the rented Audi, but parts from 5 other stolen vehicles. Chassis numbers had been ground off, plates removed, but the components told their own story. That's how the first yard was uncovered. Once that location was burned, the group pivoted. They moved into another unit, this time behind a quick-fit garage in Wigan, rented under the alias David Brown, a fake name they kept using over and over again. But the mistake was the same. A rented Mercedes was reported stolen by one of the gang members himself, trying to spin a lie that the car had vanished from his driveway. The vehicle's tracker told a different story, and once again, officers landed on a workshop filled with stolen engines and stripped Range Rovers. Then came the breakthrough. A dramatic raid on Vale Mill, a towering, hollowed-out industrial space in Chadderton, found a cache of parts from vehicles stolen across the country. Tracking data, CCTV, and dozens of text messages painted a full picture. This wasn't a loose crew doing the odd job. This was a business, a moving network of fake rentals, container bookings, forged invoices, burner phones, and storage units that were always one step ahead, until they weren't. Police began linking incidents through telecoms analysis and the mapping of stolen parts. A Porsche engine lifted from a burglary in Bolton was found next to a Range Rover transmission stolen in London. Containers full of stolen car parts were being loaded at shipping yards and labelled as industrial scrap or second-hand goods. One was stopped in Seaforth before it left for Dubai. Another was intercepted in Istanbul. A third made it all the way to Sharjah in the UAE before being ordered back unopened. What connected it all? A fake shipping firm, KG Logistics. On paper, it looked legitimate. In reality, it was a paper-thin cover for moving stolen UK vehicles overseas. The names used to rent units and order containers often belonged to cloned identities, real businesses that had no idea their information had been hijacked. Bank accounts opened under fake trading names received tens of thousands in unexplained funds, most of which disappeared as fast as it arrived. Meanwhile, the conspirators messaged each other through a WhatsApp group named The Company. In one thread, one of them laughed after a police raid, writing, 5-0 busted the yard again, get your jail kit ready. These weren't just thieves, they were veterans who knew how to run when the heat came, but also knew how to keep the machine turning until the very last minute. That bravado, that sense of untouchability, would be their downfall. Because by now, the cops weren't just chasing stolen cars. They were chasing a pattern, a syndicate, a criminal operation pretending to be a business. And this time, they weren't stopping at the gates. When the final pieces of the case were laid bare in court, The scale of the conspiracy stunned even experienced detectives. A slick, coordinated car theft and export operation that had stretched across Greater Manchester into the Midlands, London, and all the way to the Middle East. Over £3 million worth of stolen vehicles, 90 high-end cars, 11 shipping containers tracked, and in the end, a full roster of names standing trial. Asif Hussain, the gang's ringleader. He posed as a respectable businessman, ran a car sales firm, and lived in a detached home in Stockport. But behind that image was a man with 48 previous convictions, a former drug dealer, and a central figure in an international criminal racket. He pleaded guilty to conspiracy to steal, handle stolen goods, export stolen vehicles, and commit fraud. The judge didn't hesitate, 15 years behind bars. Next was Hadir Ali, who had operated multiple chop shops, moved stolen engines, and used fake identities to cover his tracks. His reward? 11 years in prison. Sajid Jangaria of Bolton was jailed for 10 years, having been linked to dozens of vehicle thefts and fraud offences. He helped coordinate logistics, played a hands-on role at the sites, and even filmed target vehicles during drive-bys. Tayyib Hussain, a key player in the vehicle handling and parts distribution, got 5 years and 6 months. Ibas Shafiq, the man behind some of the gang's financial operations, was handed 5 years. He helped move cash between accounts, laundered proceeds, and, in one of the most shocking turns, successfully applied for 2 government COVID bounce-back loans totaling £95,000. He claimed the money using fake company details and funneled it into personal accounts. His business never filed a tax return. Never existed. The fraud didn't stop there, as if Hussain himself had received a £50,000 bounce-back loan. Despite his criminal history, he was approved without checks. The court heard how the system meant to support struggling UK businesses during a crisis was manipulated by men running a £1 million theft ring. The judge called it moral depravity of the highest order. More convictions followed. Asif Mashat, 3 years, 6 months. Shaz Rahman, 4 years, 9 months. Imran Taj, 4 years. Zishan Ali, 3 years, 9 months. Adam Elwood, 6 years for handling stolen goods and drug offences. Mohammed Imran, 3 years. All told, over 25 people were convicted. More than £1.7 million in cash flowed through their accounts, and untold sums were never recovered. Police believe the gang operated undetected for years, exploiting the chaos of the pandemic and weaknesses in vehicle security systems to build a thriving criminal empire. But this wasn't just a case about stolen cars. It exposed deep issues in policing, government oversight, and public safety. The judge was blunt. Too many of the gang had been previously arrested, only to be released under investigation. Background checks weren't made, cases weren't escalated. In his words, some victims may have been spared trauma if action had been taken sooner. What does all this say? That serious, organised crime doesn't always look like TV dramas. Sometimes it hides behind car lots, garages, and WhatsApp groups with names like The Company. Sometimes it wears designer clothes and signs bank forms with forged names. And sometimes it robs people while they sleep, while they're on holiday, or while they're just trying to park at an airport. These weren't kids stealing for fun. They were professionals, calculating, unapologetic. The long sentences delivered were more than just numbers. They were a warning to others running similar operations, to those who think they can hide in plain sight, and to the systems that allowed it all to happen in the first place. Because for every engine stripped and every keyless car gone in 60 seconds, there were families left afraid, businesses devastated, and a country waking up to the reality that crime, real organised crime, doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs a system too slow to catch up. And this time, the system caught up. Barely.